Welcome back to Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM. I'm Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of RCP. Joined now by Sean Trende. He's our senior elections analyst. Sean, good to have you back.
Great to be here.
All right, so Donald Trump is, we had a poll come out last week, Sean, late last week from CNN that showed 55% of folks approved of Trump's handling of his transition thus far. It's actually, we've seen a number of polls that show this, a majority approve of what he's been doing so far. How important is that? And does that number surprise you that it's that large, or is that what you would have expected?
I mean, so I remember in 2013, 2014, making comments about Barack Obama's job approval tanking after the Obamacare exchanges crashed and burned, and just getting lit up on Twitter with Democrats saying, "Oh, well, I guess that's really going to hurt his reelection effort." Ha ha ha. So in a sense, it's important to remember, no, Donald Trump does not have to run for re-election. His job approval doesn't matter in that sense. Where it does matter, though, is that we're going to have these midterm elections coming up in now 23 months.
But who's counting?
But who's counting? And these things are generally referenda on the party in power. So the fact, I mean, in 2018, the Republicans lost 40 seats during a time of peace and prosperity, in large part because, Donald Trump had spent 2 years lighting his hair on fire. And people didn't like that. And so the fact that this is a much more orderly transition this time, the fact that, every president has a few controversial picks, but by and large, Donald Trump has gotten people like, Marco Rubio and governors and fairly serious people in his administration, I think with a few exceptions, but that's, again, to be expected. I think people appreciate it, and he's acting presidential. And he knows now what acting presidential means, that being president is not the same as running a reality TV show. And I think that's something for Republicans to be optimistic about. Does it surprise me? Absolutely. I mean, the man hasn't had a positive approval rating in, 10 years in the public eye. I understand why it's positive, so in that sense, I guess it doesn't. But, that certainly wasn't my prior view of how this was going to go.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised by it, actually. That I mean, there does seem to be this sense of sort of, goodwill. Maybe that's too strong of a word, but at least optimism by folks who probably weren't, favorably disposed to Donald Trump the first time around, independent voters and maybe even some Democrats. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, the proof is going to be in the pudding. And we'll see where his approval rating goes. But as you mentioned, Sean, I mean, when he took office, I don't think in our Real Clear Politics average, he was never over 50%, even from the day that he was inaugurated last time around. So he's already starting out ahead of where he was in 2016. All right, so you mentioned the midterms, so let's play the game because that's what we do, and it's super fun. Obviously, the House is going to be in play. There's just no way it can't be, given the slim majority there. But now let's look at the Senate. So Republicans are going to have a 53 seat majority. And I was looking at the races in 2016. It doesn't look like, to me, you tell me if I'm wrong, there are that many competitive seats. Maybe 3 or 4 on each side at most. But it looks like the playing field is going to be pretty small. On the Republican side, you've got Tom Tillis in North Carolina, Susan Collins in Maine, Joni Ernst in Iowa. Those are the sort of the 3 probably most competitive. John Cornyn in Texas. I'm sure Democrats are going to think they can pick off. They're always after Republicans from Texas. And then on the Democratic side, Tina Smith, Minnesota, Gary Peters in Michigan, and John Ossoff in Georgia. Looking at those races, who do you think has the advantage there? Where would you give the edge in terms of having the more competitive seats or the more vulnerable seats?
I think we do have to say first quickly on the House. The smart money is on the Republicans losing the House because the president's party always loses seats. But, Democrats have picked off a lot of the low-hanging fruit. in the last two cycles where Republicans have kind of underperformed in the House. There just aren't that many Republicans running in Harris seats for them to go after. But I agree that it's more fun and interesting at this point to talk about the Senate. And I think Georgia potentially is actually the most vulnerable seat of the bunch. Assuming that Brian Kemp gets in and that he manages to avoid a primary challenge, I think Donald Trump has by and large mended fences with the Georgia Republican Party, so I don't think Trump would back a challenge to Kemp. And if Kemp wants it, I think he's a generally popular governor. I think the DNA of Georgia is still pretty Republican. And that's going to be a tough race. On the Republican side, obviously, if Susan Collins has said she's running, and she has a history of running ahead of Donald Trump, so we'll see if Democrats can put up points there. But beyond that, yeah, you got Tom Tillis in North Carolina. I know Mark Robinson is making noises about primarying him, which, if that were successful, is obviously probably the end of the road for him. For Republicans there, but I don't think that we have seen Republicans do some pretty catastrophic face plants over the last 14 years in Senate races. I think that would exceed Delaware 2010.
Christine O'Donnell, I'm a witch.
That would be worse than that.
It's one of the all-time greats.
It was, but that was also kind of like more of a no, we don't like Mike Castle. Let's see what this Christine O'Donnell is. Oh, wait, now that she's won the primary, here comes the dirt on her. This would be like Republicans walking full into a machine gun nest, right? They know what's coming with Mark Robinson. I think one that's kind of underrated is maybe if Laura Trump is the appointee in Florida Senate. That Florida Senate race could go sideways for Republicans, if Gates gets in or if Laura Trump is the nominee and Trump is unpopular. But you're right. Beyond that, I mean, we're talking about maybe Joni Ernst gets primaried in Iowa and the person is too far to the right for the Iowa electorate. I mean, it's just real Texas, maybe. It's really slim pickings for the Democrats. Democrats trying to get back the Senate is probably a two-cycle initiative for them.
And Sean, what about should Democrats be worried at all about places like Colorado and New Mexico or any of these other states that we saw a pretty significant shift in some of these blue states to the right when Donald Trump was at the top of the ticket. But as you mentioned, he won't be on the ballot. And historically, the first midterm for an incumbent presidency does not go well. But should Democrats have any concern given how the 2024 election went?
So if you look at the places where Donald Trump didn't make big gains, Colorado is in there. Even New Mexico, I mean, surprisingly, given the large Hispanic population and large working class population, didn't, Republicans ran a Domenici, who was kind of like Republican royalty there, and it didn't really move the needle. I think if you're looking for potential soft spots for Democrats, it would be maybe Michigan. Gary Peters doesn't light anyone on fire, anyone's heartstrings on fire, so maybe him. Maybe in New Hampshire if Shaheen retires and Chris Sununu decides he wants to be a senator. But we'll just have to wait and see on those.
What about my home state of Illinois, Dick Durbin? He hasn't declared yet, and he's getting up there in age, and there's certainly some talk about him having lost a step or two. Let's say he declines and it becomes an open seat. Any chance for Republicans in the state of Illinois, Sean?
No.
All right.
Look. Let's look at it this way. It was open in 2010.
Yeah.
Republicans ran probably their best statewide candidate in 20 years there. Republicans ran a criminal, or Democrats ran a criminal, and it was a 2-point race.
You're talking about Mark Kirk versus Alexi Giannoulis.
Pre-stroke Mark Kirk against Alexi Giannoulis.
Yeah, and it didn't go well. All right, so fine. So Republicans will continue to be shut out, probably the state of Illinois. I actually agree with that, by the way. But again, we're playing the game. That's what we do.
Yeah.
All right. Sean Trende, Senior Elections Analyst for Real Clear Politics. Sean, always great to have you. Thanks for being on.
Thank you.
All right, going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more Real Clear Politics on SiriusXM after this.